When I tell you that healthcare can be weaponized against the people, it matters. Hey, this is Brian Christine, back for another episode of Common Sense with Brian Christine. Before we get started today, I wanted to put a plug in for someone who's running for the Jefferson County Sheriff. Jared Hudson is running for the Jefferson County, Alabama Sheriff. Now, he's going to be on the ballot on November 8th at the general election, and this is a really important election here in Jefferson County. Jared is the Republican candidate. He's a father. He's a husband. He's a man of faith. He's a former Navy SEAL. He is exactly what we need as Jefferson County Sheriff. Right now, the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office is in a state of disarray. There are deputies that are leaving left and right. They've lost confidence in the current sheriff. Jared Hudson is exactly what we need. My wife and I live in Jefferson County. My daughter, my son-in-law, and my granddaughter live in Jefferson County. It's my responsibility to do everything that I can do to take care of them. One of the things that I can do to take care of them is vote for Jared Hudson for Jefferson County Sheriff on November 8th, and I want you to do the same thing. Go to his website, JaredHudsonForSheriff.com. Take a look at him. He's great. Like I said, the subject today is going to be when healthcare is used as a weapon. We've seen so much happen in the United States and around the world in the last few years related to the COVID pandemic. And I think if we look to see how the government in the United States has responded to the pandemic, I think that we can see that they have used healthcare or healthcare concerns as a weapon to control the people and to really to exert their will. Now understand, COVID-19 is a real disease. It is a problem. We know that there have been people who have died from that, but we also know that most people who get infected aren't going to die. Most people who get infected aren't going to get sick. But the government and the left have used the pandemic to control people. And so when I say that, what I mean is that we have been forced as a society to take a vaccination that ultimately was proved not to prevent the disease and not to prevent the spread of the disease. We've been forced to take the vaccination. How? Well, the government said, if you don't take the vaccine, you may lose your job, you may lose your income. There were threats in this way. And so a lot of individuals were forced to take the vaccine and to take the boosters. And if someone wanted to take the vaccine, I think that's fine. But forcing people to take a vaccination is absolutely wrong. This vaccine hasn't been thoroughly studied. It probably won't be thoroughly studied for years. We don't know the long-term effects of the COVID-19 vaccination because it hasn't been around for a long time. Now, I took the vaccination. I took both rounds of the vaccination. I didn't take any boosters, and I'm not going to. I don't think I need to. So if someone chose to take the vaccine, that's fine. But forcing people to take the vaccine, that's where the problem comes in. Think about the mask mandates. Masks did nothing to prevent COVID-19 or to prevent the spread, and yet people were forced to wear masks, especially children. Children were forced to wear masks, and we know that masks in children hamper the learning process and have a negative effect on kids, and yet they were forced to wear masks. And in Alabama, Governor Ivey forced us to wear masks. Mask mandates was absolutely the wrong thing to do, but it's another example of how the government could be using healthcare or healthcare concerns to carry out their agenda and to force compliance on the people. During the pandemic, we've seen unelected bureaucrats like Dr. Fauci dictating policy that ultimately was used to control people. That's a problem. And during the pandemic, we've seen the left label individuals who didn't want to take the vaccine for very good reasons. We've seen them label them as anti-science. We've seen them compared to domestic terrorists. We've seen the left say that people who didn't want to get vaccinated or get boosted don't care about the elderly and put them at risk. None of that is true, but it's a way of labeling those individuals who didn't want to take the vaccination, labeling them as different or other. And when a government starts to do that, you can bet that's going to lead to persecution of some type. So how our government responded to the COVID-19 pandemic showed how they can use healthcare and healthcare concerns as a weapon or as a way of controlling people. We've also seen that during the COVID-19 pandemic is that the concern about the pandemic and the concern about this healthcare issue was really used to target people of faith and religious institutions. If you think about that, during the pandemic, churches were closed where liquor stores remained open, abortion clinics remained open. Churches were absolutely limited in terms of how many people could be attending a worship service at one time. Nobody ever tried to limit a Black Lives Matter protest or an Antifa protest. You could have thousands shoulder to shoulder, back to back, and no one cared. But if you wanted to get more than a few people to go to church, there was pushback and there were attempts to stop that, regulate that, and prevent that from happening. During the pandemic, there were people of faith, people who, because of their religious convictions, didn't want to take the vaccine. And they were absolutely ostracized and criticized by the government. And lastly, during the pandemic, people of faith were targeted as their bishops and their pastors and their ministers and their priests were lied to by healthcare officials in the government as they tried to get them to go along with shutting down places of worship or limiting congregations. So the government's response and use of the pandemic and that healthcare concern really targeting people of faith, I think, was absolutely evident over the past 2 or 3 years. During the pandemic, nationwide, about 33% of small businesses closed. In Alabama, that percentage was 35 to 36%. Forced shutdowns absolutely contributed to this. Limiting the number of people, for instance, who could sit inside a restaurant absolutely contributed to this. And when you think about this, who really benefited? Who benefited from small businesses shutting down? Big corporations like Amazon absolutely benefited. People like George Soros and the World Economic Forum, as they talk about the Great Reset, using the pandemic as the Great Reset to absolutely push multinational large corporations and conglomerates, they benefited from the closing of small businesses. Now, was there a worldwide concerted effort to close small businesses and to force them out of business? I don't know if there was, but it looks mighty suspicious to me. Clearly, there were a lot of small businesses that were hurt by the way that this healthcare concern, the pandemic, was weaponized and how it was treated by our government and by bigger business. One of the most important things that has happened during the pandemic has been that the military has really targeted individuals who don't want to take the vaccination or boosters, and really it's been almost a purge of the military. The military has given very few exceptions to vaccination and almost no exceptions for religious concerns. What's the common theme with these individuals in the military who didn't want to take the vaccine or take boosters? Well, if you look, the vast majority are very politically conservative and they tend to be religious. The government is prepared, even as you watch this video, they're prepared to fire 40,000 National Guardsmen, almost 20,000 reservists, and about 15 to 16,000 active duty military members because of the refusal to take the vaccination. Now, this is at a time when China is acting more aggressive than ever, at a time when we have a war going on in Eastern Europe, but they're willing to let these individuals go. Some people would say, and I think it may be true, that there's an active purge in the military. They're trying to purge conservatives and people of faith from the military. It's another example of how this healthcare concern has been weaponized, and healthcare, in this case the vaccination, has been used as a weapon against people in the military or against the citizens. There's absolutely no question that the government, the Biden administration, has used the pandemic to make people more dependent on government. How have they done that? They've given out money. They've encouraged people really to stay home from work. We have so many less people working now because they've made money. They can make money by staying home. There's been a moratorium on evictions, again, making people more dependent on the government. And most recently, we've seen the Biden administration using a COVID emergency relief measure to actually forego student loans. Now, Joe Biden has just said that the pandemic is over, and yet you're going to force citizens in America, many of whom have never even gone on to college, you're going to force them to pay off student loans for students who knowingly took out this money, took out these loans in good faith. It's a way to make people more dependent on the government. Absolutely. Some would say that this is all being done, like the student loan thing is being done just to get ready for the midterm elections. But I think there's something deeper and really something more sinister, trying to make people more dependent on the government. And any state government, any state legislature or governor that took federal funds, because federal funds always have strings attached, and certainly this was done by our governor and our legislature here in Alabama, during the pandemic, the federal government has used this healthcare situation as a weapon against the people and to make people more dependent on the federal government. And lastly, and this is probably the most important thing that's happened during the pandemic, is that there is no question that the pandemic was used to influence the outcome of the 2020 elections. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean that in some battleground states like Pennsylvania or Ohio or Wisconsin, governors and Supreme Courts used the pandemic as an excuse to change election rules. It's only supposed to be done by the state legislatures. They changed election rules to allow and to increase the use of mail-in ballots, changed election rules to increase the use of drop boxes. They extended voting deadlines illegally. They increased the use of absentee ballots. All of this was done to scare people and to make them believe that voting in person was danger during the pandemic. And this allows ballot harvesting and the use of illegal ballots. And there's no question this influenced the outcome of the 2020 election. Just watch 2,000 Mules. And remember, this was not only federal elections, but this is also elections at the local level. There was a profound effect in 2020. So the government's response to the COVID-19 pandemic was a way that healthcare and a healthcare concern could be used to control the public, to guide the public, and to exert their influence upon the public. When I talk about healthcare being used as a weapon, and we talk about the COVID-19 pandemic, then what I'm saying is that the government has used this legitimate healthcare concern, but used it in a way to control people, to force a particular agenda, and to get outcomes that they wanted. They certainly used the COVID-19 pandemic as a weapon against the citizens, in my opinion. Now, when you look at how that was done, you look at the far-ranging effects, the effect on our economy, loss of small business, the effect on our autonomy, saying that you have to take a vaccination or you have to wear a mask, the effect on our ability to worship the way that we want to by closing churches or limiting congregation sizes, and obviously the effect on the 2020 election. I think you can see that healthcare has been weaponized during the COVID-19 pandemic. It's absolutely been used by the government for their own end. And I think that absolutely matters. To me, it's common sense that as we go forward, that when this happens again, and there may well be another pandemic at some point, we the people are not going to let the government lead us, guide us, and control us as we have. Thank you for watching another episode of Common Sense with Brian Christine. I'll see you next time. Please feel free to share this video, to like this video, follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and now coming my YouTube channel. I'll see you next time.